In this lesson, we'll create a drawing of a landscape using pastels in about an hour. Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at creating a landscape drawing that features some white fluffy clouds using pastels, and we're going to restrict our drawing time to about an hour. So this is going to be a looser drawing, it's a smaller drawing, but of course I encourage you to follow alongside of me and work alongside of me as well. Now we'll start by taking a look at the materials and then we'll go right into the process. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. In this lesson, we'll be using Rembrandt soft pastels, and I'll be working on PastelMat paper. I'm going to be working on a darker gray surface, but this type of paper is a wonderful surface for working with pastels. It has a good amount of tooth, even though it doesn't look like it in the video right here, so you can layer to your heart's content, and it blends very easily as well. We'll start here with a medium to darker blue here, and we're going to create a gradation from the top edge of the picture plane down all the way down past the horizon line. So we're basically going to work in layers here. We're going to create a base application using several different versions of blue, and then we'll layer the clouds over the top. So after our first blue, we're going to go with a different blue. This blue is a little bit more true to a primary blue. The first blue is a little bit more of a blue purple. The layering of these colors is going to, of course, put a little bit more pastel into the tooth of the paper, but it's also going to create a little bit more depth in the color as well. Now we're going to take a lighter blue and work our way from the bottom up, and then an even lighter blue underneath that to create a gradation or slow change in color and value from the top edge of the picture plane down past the horizon line. Then we'll bring in another blue to ease that transition, and then I'm going to use my finger here to do a little bit of blending to create a smooth transition from the darker blues to the lighter blues at the bottom. Now we're ready to start putting in some of the shapes of the clouds, and I'm going to use a warmer gray initially just to kind of box in the shapes of the clouds here. And they don't have to be exactly the same as the reference. It never has to be exactly the same as the reference. In fact, if you look at the blues I used in my sky, they're quite different from the blues in the reference. I'm using not the tip of the pastel, but the side of the pastel to basically block in these shapes. And we're going to go all the way down past the horizon line again. And now we're going to add a little bit of a darker value. This is a darker gray, but it leans a little bit towards purple. We're going to be incorporating some purples in our clouds. So in this case, the light source is coming from the left, but of course, it's above the clouds as well. So we're going to see the darker portions of the clouds. These shapes are going to exist mainly on the underside of the clouds and on the right side of the clouds as well. We're not worried about details right now, obviously. We're only concerned about getting some colors and values in place. Now I'm using a little bit of that blue that I used initially for the top portion of the sky to add a little bit more variety here. Again, I'm focusing mainly on the dark to medium values that I see in the clouds. A little bit more purple here this time. This is more of a red purple. I'll add a couple of touches here and there, again, to add a little bit more depth and interest to the color in our clouds. And again, it may look like I'm using the tip of the pastel, but I'm actually using the side more so than the tip. If you use the tip, you're going to create lines. If you use the side, you're going to create more of some shapes. A little bit more blue down here on the bottom. This is the primary blue that we used in the sky. That was the second pastel that we used. And now back with that warm gray again. Now, as we go over the top of some of the pastel applications, you'll see that some mixing occurs, and we're starting to get some of that material to look a little bit softer and more blended. Now, it might be helpful to look at the negative shapes in between the clouds to help you get the shapes in the right place. But again, allow yourself some freedom here. It doesn't have to be an exact copy or replica of the photo. Now it's back to that darker gray that leans a little bit towards purple. And you can see how much softer the applications look. This, of course, is simply because we are layering the pastels on the surface. And when you're working with a colored medium like pastels or colored pencils, layering is so important to create depth in color. Be patient during this process and allow your layers to do the work for you. We can refine the shape a little bit as we go with these different versions of different colors, these blues, these purples, these grays. And slowly our clouds will start to take shape. We just have to be patient here. I think a lot of people who are new to pastels are lacking that patience or expecting some results pretty quickly. With pen and ink and graphite, of course, we see those results very quickly on the surface, but with pastels, we have to be patient and keep in mind that the thought process we should have is really more akin towards painting than it is drawing, even though we're applying a dry medium to the surface. So this is technically drawing. We're still thinking about things more so like a painter. All right, now with a lighter blue, this is one of the blues that we used on the lower portion of the sky. We're going to apply that and we're going to see some blending occur, some more blending. And in the areas that aren't blended as much as the others, you can really see how much tooth or texture that we have with the PastelMat paper. All right, now this might look like I'm applying white, but this is actually a very, very, very light yellow. So not quite white, but pretty close to white. We're going to start putting in some of the highlights, and now our clouds are going to start to gradually look more three-dimensional. Now again, our light source is originating from the left, the upper left-hand portion. So we're going to see these highlights primarily on the top parts of the clouds, and more dominantly so on the left side of the clouds as well. And again, as we start to add these bits of lighter value, some additional blending occurs, and our drawing is actually starting to look more like a painting. Keep in mind that you can vary the intensity of the value by adjusting the amount of pressure that you place on the pastel. If you put more pressure on the pastel, of course, the color is going to be stronger and more intense, but you can put a little bit less pressure to create more of a slow change into the darker values around these highlights. Here you can see I'm varying the intensity as I just spoke about. And you can continue to shape the clouds as well using this lighter value. So if you want to bring out sections to make them look like they're protruding towards the viewer, they're going to pick up more light. So you can have more intense lighter values in those locations. Here you can see where I'm using the side of the pastel, where with the overhead camera, it may look like I'm using the tip. And now our clouds are starting to look like clouds. But remember, if we weren't patient and we tried to rush the process, it would be real easy to get frustrated in those early stages. So that's why it's incredibly important to just patiently continue to layer and gradually build up the contrast and values. Now, as we work down lower on the picture plane, we're getting actually further away from the viewer as we work towards the horizon line.
And this means that our clouds are going to overlap a little bit more on this lower section. So we're going to see a little bit more variety here, a little bit more contrast as well, where on the upper portion of the picture plane, there's quite a bit of space between the clouds, and we can see a little bit more of that blue sky peeking through. Now I'm going back and just intensifying some of the highlights a little bit further. At this point, I'm looking for the lightest values that I see in the reference and adding those lightest values to the clouds. Now, we're working from the background to the middle ground, and then we'll address the foreground last. With a medium like pastels, which are able to cover over applications completely, opaquely, we can work in this way. So we can develop the sky completely before moving on to the middle ground, and we can allow the middle ground to overlap the sky. And then once we've developed the middle ground, we can overlap the middle ground with the foreground. So it makes sense in this case to work from the background to the middle ground to the foreground. Now I'm going to go in and do some negative painting here with the dark blue pastel. And what I'm doing here is I'm just redefining the edges of the clouds. So I'm basically looking at the blue shapes in between the clouds and using that blue pastel to define the edges. And of course, as we work to the middle portion of the sky, we're going to use a lighter blue. And now our sky is starting to come together. It's still rather loose and very painterly, but that's to be expected with this drawing since we're only spending about an hour on it. And I actually like this look with pastels. I like the painterly look when I'm working with pastels anyway. Now, up to this point, we haven't really done any blending with the finger, but I'm going to smudge just a couple of areas where I want a little bit of a softer edge or a softer transition. A little bit more blue. Here, again, just defining the edges of the clouds a little bit further. And at this point, you can see how different my painted sky is than the reference. So we're using the reference as just that, a reference. We're getting information from it and using it to develop our own painting here, our own pastel painting. So you don't really need to feel like you are replicating the reference. So many people get caught up in replicating references and trying to create something that's super photorealistic when really you don't have to do that. All right, now let's move on to the middle ground, and I'm going to start with a very dark brown, and I'm just going to be establishing the shapes of the trees that overlap the horizon line with this dark color. So we need a little bit of variety there on the top edge where the tree shapes are different. And then we're going to go back with a dark green initially to add a little bit of color here. We're going to leave open some of the areas where we see the brown. So we're just establishing a little bit of contrast and a little bit of variety in the color initially. Now I'm going to use a very dark gray. This may look black, but this is a very, very dark gray. I'm not using black at all in this piece. Black can make colored images look flat if you're not careful. So I'm using a very dark gray here, and then I'm going over the top of that actually with a bit of darker blue. That will mix to a certain degree and create a more natural looking dark tone. And the blue will also indicate some of the shadowed areas in the trees. Of course, we make the color green by combining yellow and blue, and yellow is the lighter of the two colors, but it's also the warmer of the two colors. So if we use blue for the shadowed areas, it makes a little bit more sense for something that's green, like a tree. Now a lighter yellow-green, and again, we're considering the light source. The light source is coming from the left side, so the left portions of these trees are going to be highlighted. They're going to be lighter in value, so we're reserving the lighter green for those sections. And I'm also using a little bit of burnt ochre here and there to add a little bit more variety to the color. If you look real close at the tree line, you can see some of those oranges popping through. Now an even lighter yellow-green here, again, highlighting the highlights. Now with a little bit of distance from the piece, you can see how this illusion is starting to make sense. We can see the clouds and we can see them overlapped by the line of trees, which really the line of trees is just shapes of different colors and values. Now, in between some of the areas of the trees and also on the lower part of the edge of the trees, I'm using a much darker green here. This is a cooler green, but it is much darker than the greens that we've used so far. Now, you might be tempted to reach for a pastel pencil for this, and if you do, that's absolutely fine. I decided to just use the pastel sticks here, and I'm going to go ahead and draw in that building. I'm going to start with the roof and just using a little bit of burnt ochre for that initially. We'll use the dark brown to create a shadowed shape. And then I'm going to use a very, very light yellow-green for the edge of the building or the lower part of the building initially. That front edge is picking up most of the light, so it's slightly lighter in value. So we'll use a darker brown to create the shadow. And then we'll go back over the top of it with that very light yellow-green. And then back again with a bit of the burnt ochre. Now I use that very dark gray and put in a little bit more of a shadow and an indication of that tiny window. And then we can frame that out a little bit more with the light yellow-green. And at this point, I decide that the shadow needs a little bit of a deeper red. So a touch of a deeper red is added there. And now we'll move on to the foreground. So we're going to allow the foreground to overlap the middle ground. And I'm going to start with yellow ochre, just defining the shape of the yellow parts of the field. And now I'm going to go a little bit more of a bolder color here. This is still somewhat of a yellow ochre. It's just a little bit more saturated. And then stepping up the saturation scale even further, we're going to go with a yellow that's more like a primary yellow. Now I'm using my directional strokes here to indicate the texture in the field. You could go in with a darker brown if you wanted to make it a little bit more visible, but in this case, I'm just going to kind of insinuate that texture. And you can see here I'm adding some light yellow-green in the background for some of that grass that's off in the distance. And again, allowing that to overlap both the foreground and the middle ground at this point. Now we'll go a little bit darker. There is quite a bit of variety in the value and color in these green sections. So a slightly darker yellow-green. And then an even lighter yellow-green to make some of the highlights just a little bit stronger. So you can see with just 3 colors, we have quite a bit of variety in that green grassy section. Using yellow-green, we'll go ahead and define that little strip of grass on the left side of the picture plane. And then here again, we'll use a lighter version and a darker version to add a little bit of variety. All right, now a much lighter yellow-green again to bring out some of those highlights. Before switching back over to our dark brown, we're going to go ahead and define the shapes of the trees in the foreground. And you can see that it's going to overlap the middle ground and go up into the background just a bit. We're just worried about the shape initially here. We'll go ahead and pull out a little bit of indication of the shadow, the cast shadow on the field. And here again, we'll use a little bit of dark blue on the shadowed sides of these trees. Now that dark blue color is not visible in the reference, but we know that these trees are green, so we're using a little bit of blue in the shadowed section. And then we use that dark gray again to create some darker shadows before going back over the top of it all with a bit of yellow-green. Now we'll go ahead and put in some of the highlights. Again, these highlights are going to exist on the left side of the trees since the light source is originating from the left side. And to differentiate the few trees that sit here, there is a little bit of a strip of lighter green that is visible. So we'll go ahead and add that. And then we'll define, defines the wrong word. We're going to give an indication of some of the details here with this lighter yellow-green. We want to make sure that the shape that's created by the shadow and the shape that's created by the highlight are organic shapes. We'll add just a touch of burnt ochre here, again, just to add a little bit more variety. And again, if you squint really close, you can kind of see those little bits of orange. And then with a bit more pressure, we'll bump up the intensity of the highlights with the yellow-green. And now we're going to define the shapes of the shadows a little bit further with the yellow ochre. This is similar to what we did in the sky with the clouds, where we took the blue and defined the shapes of the clouds. We can define the shapes of the shadows using the lighter values around it. A bit more texture here in the field in the foreground. I'm going to let some of the texture of the paper still show through here in the foreground just to get a little bit more variety in the value. And then we'll use just a touch of cream here to add the road around the grassy area in the foreground. And now it's time to peel back our tape because at this point I've spent around an hour on this pastel sketch. And now our pastel sketch of a landscape is complete.
Thanks so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you were able to pick up a couple of things here and there. And if you want to go a little bit deeper with this medium, pastels, and this specific surface PastelMat paper, there is a lesson series that we have at thevirtualinstructor.com in which we create a marsh landscape using pastels and pastel pencils on PastelMat paper. This 6-part lesson series is presented in real time so you can follow along and create your own drawing. And for a limited time, I'm offering this lesson series to you at 20% off the regular price. All you have to do is use the course promo COURSE20, which you see on your screen there, and you can enter that at checkout and get the 20% off. Now, this lesson series is available to members as well. Our membership program includes a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subject matter and media, and our courses include instructional videos and step-by-step ebooks, so you can follow along very easily. We also do the weekly live lessons, which our live lessons are broadcast live to members each week, and then recorded and stored in our vault. You can go back and watch any of our live lesson series all the way back to 2012. There's also weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute and a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. All of that is included in the membership program, which is free to start. We offer everyone a free trial. So if you want to learn more about the membership program, I'll leave a link in the description below. You can check it out. And I'll also leave a link in the description below to that lesson series where we create that marsh landscape. Now, if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and get in our mailing list, there's a link in the description below for that as well. Again, thanks again for watching. And as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.